Good morning, everyone. I'm Kevin Allen, and I'm joined by my usual podcast partner, former NHL defenseman Tom Laidlaw. Played for many years for the New York Rangers and Los Angeles Kings, and he was also a player agent. And you may remember, too, he was contested on the Survivor Series.
I need to apologize, too, because you're always promoting me, and we don't ever say anything about you and all your Hall of Fames you're in, your professional hockey writing. No, seriously, we don't. We always how many years did you write with USA Today?
35.
35, head of the Professional Hockey Writers Association. And I know I joke around about the Hall of Fames, but you are in a few Hall of Fames. How many are you in?
I've been honored by the Hall of Fame with the Elmer Ferguson Award. And you always joke around because some other things that I've done sound like Hall of Fame awards, but they're not really. So,
all right. Still awards, though. So, how do we say it? Well awarded, great career as a writer for many years.
Well, I appreciate that, but anyway, let's jump right in, Tom. I saw this morning. I was reading the story about the NBA. Their board of governors has approved their plan for the upcoming season. Now they're going to start on December 22nd. And what I was struck by in looking at that, and I knew this, but it just sort of brought it home because when you and I have talked so much about the flat cap, is their salary cap is $109 million. Now, what's interesting about that is that's spread over what, 10 guys?
10 or 11, yeah. Yep.
And we're spreading 81 million. Now, it's still millions of dollars. So anybody, I certainly understand that when you're slugging it out, for $50,000 a year, it's hard to feel any sympathy about that. But it is interesting when you compare, where all the leagues are and how everybody's issues are different. And we've talked before about the NFL, like they're playing now, and they're playing on the COVID, which seemed dangerous when it started. Now it's like they deal with it. If this week, Baker Mayfield, the Cleveland Browns quarterback, went on the COVID list because he had been exposed. But when he tested negative for 3 days in a row, he's off the list. Yep. Matthew Stafford was on the list, not because he had it, but because he had been exposed to it in his family life. But when he had 3 negatives in a row, he was off. And the NBA appears like it's going to try to play. I think they're going to start without fans as well. But but their television contract is certainly better than the NHL's, and that's the issue for the NHL. Like the NHL wants to start on January 1st and try to play as close to an 82 game season, but when they're doing that. The longer they go without fans, the more money their owners are going to lose.
Yeah.
So,
and I did see something where Gary Bettman was quoted, or maybe wasn't even quoted. This the thought was that they're trying to set up another bubble situation. There's several bubbles.
Yeah, some regional bubbles, or I think they're looking at everything.
Yeah,
and they're trying to be creative. They're trying to be safe. They're trying to make it so the teams lose less money. I think everyone's accepted the fact that teams are going to lose money this year. It's just how much are they willing to lose? Right. And as we reported last time, the difficulty of the situation as the teams that can't afford to lose are the teams that are going to lose the most. The Florida Panthers.
Yeah.
The Arizona Coyotes,
Carolina.
Because all these bigger markets, the New York Rangers, Montreal Canadiens, the Toronto Maple Leafs, Chicago Blackhawks, Red Wings, those are teams that have revenue streams that smaller markets don't have. Their television revenue is greater.
Think about that. That's a good point. But think about teams like New York Rangers and New York Knicks, right? Same ownership. So he's losing twice. So that happens in a few places, right?
Yeah, no, that's and the COVID situation in those 2 team markets also, you got to factor that in. That you're sharing facilities,
Yep.
Usually everybody has their own locker room and stuff, but there's not anything like that. But you're just you got fans coming through there now instead of 41 times. Eventually you're going to have them coming in twice that many. So it's going to be interesting. What's
the NBA talking about? Are they talking about a bubble situation again?
Not that I'm aware of.
Oh, okay.
I think they're just going to try to travel. But there's things they could do, like we've talked about. You could play all your games against one team in one city, and you could do it all at once. Sort of like baseball. You just move in. So you're going to play. Detroit is going to play Buffalo 3 times. So
we did that when I was with the Kings. We would go up to Winnipeg in the middle of the winter, and we would play. We'd go up there on the Thursday night, play Friday, stay over Saturday, and play again on Sunday afternoon, and fly home. So we are in Winnipeg. So like we got time to kill like on the Saturday. So we'd be walking to a movie. And I swear, like your ears would get frozen so bad. Like by the time the movie was done, your ears would thaw out, and then you could go back out in the cold again. We did not look forward to those trips at all.
Well, it's because you didn't do it right. If you're in Winnipeg in the middle of the winter and you have one day off, you go ice fishing. you get well lubricated. You go out in the shanty.
Oh,
yeah. I got to confess, I have been ice fishing.
Oh, you have? Nice.
Oh, yeah. And I don't get it. Like, fishing in itself on a beautiful spring or summer day, and you're out there, it's early in the morning and the lake is calm and it's just light. It's just great. But you're out in the winter and it's cold and the wind is howling across the lake and you're staring down to the little hole and you always got to, knock the ice away from it that's forming. Like,
Well, the whole fishing thing altogether to me just doesn't. I get it, but I mean, you're sitting there for so long just doing nothing. I mean, it's.
No, I mean, yeah, but if you're sitting there with a good buddy and you're chatting about, about life and how the teams are doing and all that kind of stuff, it's not so bad because there's always drinking involved, whether it's the winter, spring, or summer.
Yeah, excellent point.
So
we find the good in everything. I like that.
But I don't find much good in ice fishing.
That's great.
Like, it's cold out there, and I don't get all that. Right. Anyway, a couple of things I wanted to talk about here and try to have some fun with this.
Yes, I like this.
I was thinking about how tight races are, and there's so much parity, and I think one player could make a difference. So my homework assignment to Tom was come up with 3 teams who could be helped by the inclusion of one player from another team, but no superstars. In other words, you can't just say, the Red Wings get Connor McDavid, or you can't take a top 3 goalie. You can't say, that the Buffalo Sabres would be a much better team if they got Vasilevsky. So let's go. I got my 3, you got yours, and let's see what we end up.
All right. So my first one is, and obviously we're factoring in the salary cap here, right? So teams that are up against the cap are more likely to maybe.
Yeah, we're factoring in, but there are ways to make it work. So sure.
So I probably factored in the salary cap more. So I looked at a team like the Calgary Flames. They're right up against the cap. They got no cap space whatsoever. Sean Monahan's name has been floated around there. So I've got him going to the New Jersey Devils. I think he's still. The Devils are trying to, rebuild that team, stay younger. He's only 26 years old. He's got 3 years on his deal at just over $6 million. Again, the Devils got like $17 million in cap space. So I just, I think, wow, it's, I think that's a team. Now, does that put the Devils into a playoff spot? I don't think it does, but I think for the future, like now you've got another additional good young centerman there. So I like that.
Yeah, that makes some sense for me too. And I like the idea of then you got a center combination of Hughes and Monahan, and you got a smaller center and a bigger center. And that's kind of looking for it. So it's not necessarily, whether or not you could actually make that trade, but just does it work? Like I've got like Brendan Gallagher going to the Islanders. And
really?
Yeah.
He just signed his new deal there, right?
He did. But I mean, I was thinking more just in terms of the player and not so much for whether or
Okay.
not it actually could happen. You know,
Yeah. Okay.
so I took him, and what I liked about that is, you know, he's perfect for a Barry Trotz team. He's difficult to play against, and I think they need scoring.
Yes, they
And
do.
you know, it's when you get a player who can score and also provide, you know, the element that he does of the abrasiveness. I think it really adds to it. So I think he would be a really good fit.
I like that fit there. As a player going someplace, he is good. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, although you know, you took it a little bit differently. You're thinking if whether there's any logic to it. You know, the Brendan Gallagher isn't going anywhere from Montreal. I'm just stealing a player from another team. So.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I've got Pavel Buchnevich from the Rangers going to the Ottawa Senators. I think the same thing. So Buchnevich is 25 years old. Ottawa again is retooling. They've got lots of cap space. He's got 1 year left on his deal at just over $3 million. The Rangers could use the cap space, and he's been a player there with the Rangers that like you see his talent, but man, it's just like you're always wanting more from him. And it's not like they don't like him. Again, this is my interpretation of it. It's just that, you know, he's that guy that maybe he needs to get someplace else and get more of a role, which he would in Ottawa for sure.
Yeah, and I like that move too, just because, you know, I think Pierre Dorion is collecting talented players who, you know, don't necessarily make a lot of money because, you know, he's not going to the cap ceiling, and maybe are either underperforming or undervalued, or and he's one of those guys. Like you know, on the Senators, maybe he becomes the top line guy and becomes their leading scorer. He easily could do that. So I like that. I went and to Carolina. I debated whether Carolina and Buffalo to send Marc-Andre Fleury. Now he's not a premium goalie anymore.
I thought about that. Yeah.
But I think he could help Carolina take that next step. Like, he's been there before. Yeah. You know, he's won championships. He's got a team that nobody thought could possibly get to a final, and he got them there in the Vegas Golden Knights. I think he still has something to give. He's a great team guy, and I think he'd be great in Carolina. So that's what I decided on him. Even though I'd like to try to find Buffalo a goalie as well.
Yeah, I know, but I agree with you totally. He is a great team guy, and I really think what they built there in Carolina is that real good team atmosphere. They got a great culture. Starts from the top. You know, Rob Brindamore and our friend, obviously, Don Waddell is the president, general manager. I like what they built there as far as that team culture, and I like that fit. That's a good fit. I like Marc-Andre Fleury there. That's good.
Okay, what do you got?
So Patrick Laine. I don't know. Like, I see Winnipeg right up against the cap. I just hear all this noise about him wanting to play with certain guys and where he wants to play in the lineup and all that kind of stuff. And same as Carolina, I think Winnipeg is really built like that team culture. And I know I hear different stories. Is he getting moved or not? I think you touched on it last time. You didn't think he'd be getting moved, but I'd like to get him out of there, and I'd like to get him to the Los Angeles Kings. I just think the Kings are old. You look at their lineup; they need to get the young guys in there. Laine is only 22 years oold. Again, they've got the cap space there with the Kings. So I've got Patrick Laine going to the LA Kings.
Yeah, and you know, since they're in the middle of a rebuild, that makes you know, a lot of sense. And they obviously just picked up a center in the draft, and you know, so it would be a good fit there. I hope Winnipeg doesn't trade him, to be honest with you. Yeah. I think they're going to regret it if they do. So.
Yeah, well, you know what? I think, to me, that's a great point, though. But that's one of those deals you say to yourself, yes, we will regret this down the road, but we just feel like they need the cap space. I don't think they're getting the best out of him there, and he needs to change the scenery. But I agree. It is going to be a deal that they look back on it, and they got to know that. Listen, he's going to go there, and he's going to play great. We know that.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's funny when we were talking about this, I just had a flashback to the story of Brett Hull when Cliff Fletcher traded him to St. Louis. Right. Cliff Fletcher in the press conference predicted that Brett Hull was going to be a great player. And you know, that he says, you know, and we're going to be talking about this for years for what we gave up, but I'm trying to win a championship, you know, right here this year. And, you know, obviously they did win a championship that year. So,
and remember when Dallas traded Jerome McGinley? Yeah. I think it's the same kind of thing. They knew he was going to be great, but they wanted to be good right away. So they got Joe Nieuwendyk, who was a much more veteran player. It wasn't the same. Yeah, he was a very good player, but he wasn't the same as Jerome McGinley. So I agree. Who else was there? Do you think Boston felt like that when they traded Sagan to Dallas? Do you think they just had too many centermen? Like there was no room for him there?
No, I don't think they believed in Sagan. I think that they thought he was going to be too much nightlife and all that kind of stuff. That's the impression I had there. And then they made that deal, and obviously it's worked out. In fact, Sagan is. I don't think Dallas could be happier with him. To be honest with you.
You know, it's interesting you mentioned what Fletcher had to say about Brett Hull. I remember when Mike Milbury traded away Brian Berard to Toronto. Now, remember, Mike Milbury had traded for Berard. Berard was the first overall pick to Ottawa. Milbury traded for him, so he made the decision he wanted him. And then when he trades him to Toronto, Milbury came out and made the statement that Brian Berard was a bust. And I wanted to strangle him. I mean, first of all, even if you do believe he's a bust, well, first of all, you traded for him to get him. Now you're trading him away. I just thought it was such a classless thing for him to say to be critical of players. So much better. Obviously, Fletcher believed that about Hull, but I think that's a much better way for a general manager to handle things. When you're asked about the player you've traded away, most GMs will just say something nice about him instead of being critical of players, especially when you've traded.
Yeah, that's really that. When you're heading out the door, what's it hurt you to say something nice?
Totally.
What did our grandmothers tell us when we were young? If you don't have anything nice to say about something, don't say anything. So. That's right. My final one, I went back and forth. I almost went Shea Weber. I thought Shea Weber, going to Toronto or Edmonton would be. And then I thought, he's too good a player. It's going against sort of what I wanted to say. Wow. He qualifies as a superstar. Yeah. So I'm going Ryan Ellis to Edmonton. I think he'd be the type of player that could really help that team because, they all talk, in Edmonton, we want to get that premier defenseman, but I'm not so sure they need that as much as they need a guy who can be offensive, but also play the defensive end. And, that's Ryan Ellis. He can take care of the defensive end and he can also, create offense. So I think he would be, if they got a player like Ryan Ellis and inserted him in that lineup, I think, they'd be a much better team.
Totally. I'd agree. And I'm with you. I don't think you necessarily have to have a premier defenseman. It depends what the rest of your makeup of your team is, especially there with Edmonton. As long as you've got like 6 guys and nowadays, especially get the puck up quick to the forwards and just play solid D. I don't think you have to have that premier guy. Does it help, especially on your power play? I think that helps, but I agree with you. They don't have to have that. He's good. I like him as a player too. Like I think he's a lot better than people give him credit for. Like he really moves the puck well, shoots the puck. He's good. I like him. Yeah,
he's a good player. Yeah. I've been thinking too about the situation in Chicago, and you and I have talked about, they've sort of announced a rebuild. They've made it clear now it's not going to be a Toronto rebuild where they strip it down to the chassis. They've got players that they're got contracts with that they won't be able to move on the Duncan Keith, certainly Seabrook, and then guys they want to keep obviously in Taves and Kane. So it's not that kind of rebuild, but they're rebuilding. And you and I talked about how hard that must have been. Taves even said they knew nothing about a rebuild until they read or heard about it, on television, which is, not the way you want to do it. And then I thought, this is what I thought. Well, Taves is probably thinking at some point I'm going to be general manager of this team anyway, because I see him the same way you saw Sakic and Yzerman.
Right.
He's a real smart guy.
Right.
Like think back to the NHLPA negotiations, and when Taves had something to say, everybody listened. He's a real intelligent man, and so I could see him definitely at some point, and I hope and I think he is smart enough to know that you can't just step out of the player.
Right.
And move into management. Like Steve Yzerman served as an apprentice in Detroit. He was more than willing to go and just be work with Kenny Holland and scout and get out there and learn about dealing with the salary caps and how it works and negotiating. He learned a lot just by taking his time and learning how to do it. And I think that's what Taves would do as well, that he'll move into management. But that got me thinking, and I sent you an email on this because I wanted you to think about it too. Who are some other players out there that we think at some point, they're going to move into management? And
now, are we factoring in the team that they're currently on and the position that the general manager on that team is at? Like maybe he's an older GM that's been there a long time, or is that?
You can factor that in if you want, and just explain that. I mean, that's even more. It's farther than I would want to go, but that's fine.
Well, here's a guy, Ryan Getzlaf with the Anaheim Mighty Ducks. I just when I've seen, I don't know him. He's been on Canada Cups, Team Canada, the Olympics, all the stuff he's done. He's been around. He just seems to really carry himself with that thoughtful. He thinks when he speaks. He seems to be intelligent. He's been there in Anaheim forever. Bob Murray, the general manager that's there now, has been there for a long time. I can see that kind of situation you just talked about, where once he's done playing, he goes in there and he learns from Murray for a while, and then Murray is ready to either move up or move on, and Ryan Getzlaf jumps in and takes his job.
Yeah, the guy that I want to bring up is a guy that a lot of people wouldn't think about, but when I explain my reasoning, you're going to say that makes some sense. Again, Ron Hainsey. Been around forever in the NHL, a really bright guy, has been heavily active in the Players Association. In fact, he might go to the other side. He might go to the Players Association. He's been so involved and understands all the issues. But I could see him, again, moving into management, spending some time, maybe starting out on the personnel side, and then moving into a much bigger role.
That's a good call.
He's an American college player. I don't know that he has a degree, but I'm guessing he's close to one if he doesn't have one.
I like that a lot.
Yeah. So
I got one other guy here too, that Steven Stamkos.
That's the same guy I got.
Oh, is that right? Oh,
yeah,
nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the Steve Yzerman connection, the way he carries himself, similar to Steve. He saw Steve in action. Yeah, I think I like him too. He's got that same mentality. Yeah.
Yeah, for the same reason. He watched Yzerman.
Yeah.
He's been in one city. He understands the superstar mentality. They had to struggle in Tampa before they won. He saw the good times, the bad times. He understands the ingredients necessary to win. He's a bright enough guy. You got to have an aura, in my opinion. To be a general manager, and I think he has that. I think he's good in front of the camera. He knows this. He says the right things, and it
is talk about the aura, right? Like you think of all the good GMs, like you think of Lou Lamoriello, right? He's got that aura where he's the boss, right? He runs everything. In fact, from what I understand, when he went into the Islanders, he said, "Listen, I'm running everything." The ownership just handed the team over to him, everything, marketing, all that kind of stuff he's in charge of. And, not many guys, first of all, would have the kind of the kunas to want to do that. Right. But they said, no, I'm in charge. I'm going to run this thing. I've been around long enough and done everything. So I'm going to do it.
Yeah. Well, that makes some sense. You look going back, like personality makes a difference. Think of John Davidson.
Yes.
Who went, from there to the, broadcast booth, and then ran first the St. Louis Blues, then the Columbus Blue Jackets, and now the New York Rangers. And when he made that move from the broadcast chair to director of hockey operations and president, nobody said, "Oh man, that's a big jump." You just knew, like he had that aura. Same thing with Brendan Shanahan.
Yeah,
smart guy, went from player to league office, bided his time, did the right things, and then suddenly not just become general manager, but run the whole shoot match.
The one guy that, and I don't mean to criticize him because he's had success, is Stan Bowman. I don't think he's really got an aura, but he's been successful though too, right?
Yeah. It's hard to deny his success.
Yeah. And they are different. Like David Poile, you and I respect him so much. His aura is maybe a little bit different. It's almost like that fatherly aura, right? That he's
that is his is different. But David Poile has always been miscast. People, they think of him as very conservative, doesn't make a move. When the truth is, one of the most aggressive general managers in the league.
I heard a broadcaster one time, it was a couple years ago, make that comment. I think David Poile made a trade or something like that. And the guy said, well, he's never makes trades. So it's so unlike him. And I'm thinking, what? We think back to the Rod Langway trade way back in the The 80s that he made, that was huge, right?
Yeah, you got Correa going to Nashville. You acquired Peter Forsberg.
Yep.
You traded for Subban.
Oh.
Traded Seth Jones.
Oh God, yeah.
You traded Seth Jones for Johansson.
See, there's a move that's remember we went back before and we said that trading line A, you're going to regret it. Like I think David Poyle knew how good Seth Jones was going to be, so he's going to regret that end of it because he's given up such a great player, but also thought he was getting back something pretty good with Johansson too. Right?
Well, if you think back, they had no number one center, and you can't win in this league without a number one center, and they had Yossi. So they knew they had a premium defenseman, and so at the time there was some logic to it. It was a little even then though. I don't you think a top pairing defenseman is harder to find than a center?
Oh, yeah, definitely young too. Yeah. But think about the defenseman. If they had not have traded Shea Weber and hadn't traded Seth Jones, I know it leaks holes other places, but if you got Shea Weber, Yossi, and Seth Jones on the same team still, it's almost too many good defensemen.
And then they still have Ryan Ellis. They drafted him.
Yeah.
So Dante Fabro would be their sixth. And I'm drawing a blank on who their third is. Olin. Yeah. But he's that would be the best defense by far. One of the best defenses ever.
Speaking of the franchises, whatever happened to Paul Fenton? So Paul Fenton lost his job there in Minnesota. Have we heard? Is he doing anything?
He's with Florida.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I bring him up. He played a big role in drafting all those kids there for Nashville as well, right?
Yeah, well, he's going to help Bill Zito there now, and Bill Zito, the connection to all the Jim Johansson, the late Jim Johansson. He was friends with Paul Fenton, friends with Bill Zito. I thought about that when I read that Paul Fenton got hired, that, Jim Johansson, late Jim, he would have really liked that move because he was friends with both those guys. So I want to ask you one final thing. I thought about this the other day. I was watching, I turned the channel and I landed on auto racing, which I don't watch. But when I was watching it, they were, driving around at 1 billion miles an hour. And I thought, man, that's just nuts to, put your life on the line. And that made me think about one of the things that USA Today did years ago when I was there about the hardest thing in sports. And all the sports writers, we all had to put in what we thought were the hardest acts in sports. And one of mine was, getting into a racing car and driving 227 miles an hour. Like that just takes so much courage. And in the old days I would have to cover one race a year, and I found it amazing because the sponsors back then, when they were trying to build NASCAR, they would look for a big paper like USA Today's writer, and they would want you to interview this guy an hour before he had to go out and climb and race and put his life on the line and race. Because he makes a mistake and he's dead. Yeah. And I was amazed at how calm those guys were, like an hour before race time.
All right. Wow.
So I'd put that on the list, but number one would be for me, it would be hitting a baseball. In today's game, 100 miles an hour, sliders that are at 90. And again, that baseball hits you can be killed as well. But here's my number two. And I want to know if you agree. And I could not get any support from my fellow sports writers. I think the second hardest thing in sports is defending against a player coming over the line when you're a defenseman. The guy's skating 25 miles an hour and you're skating backwards.
Right.
Like, how can that not be the second most difficult thing in all of sports?
Well, it's true because, I do my motivational speaking. I use a phrase from playing defense. It's called closing the gap, right? So when, it's your job. Like if you let the guy get too far away from you, I'm the defensive defenseman and you're coming at me with the puck, then I'm giving you all kinds of room to do what you want to do. So my job is to close the gap on you and try to stop you like at or around the blue line, not let you inside the zone, right? So yes, it is tough with all the timing and everything. And it's like for me, like part of the reason, like when I first started, I fought a little bit, and when I started fighting, there's the expectation to fight more. But I couldn't clear my mind. Like I have to play defense, and like to be a defensive defenseman like me, it's like you really got to clear your mind and be able to think like what's going on around you. Are the wingers picking up the trailing offensive players? Is my partner in the place he's supposed to be? Who am I playing against? What the time of the game is? What's the score? What's the ice conditions? All those things. You got to factor that all in, right? Because if it's bad ice, that's good for you as a defenseman. The other guy can't handle the puck as well. So, yeah, there's a lot that goes into it. It's like everything else, like you said, with the race car drivers, they're so calm because they've done it so many times. So, yes, once you've done it a lot, it doesn't seem like that big of a deal, but it is interesting. You said, and again, it's more the mind part of it, right? You got to be thinking all the time. So that's pretty cool. My one though, the toughest thing to do in sports, being a professional bull rider. Imagine that.
Yeah, no, that I think that was actually on the list, as I remember.
Yeah. I watch that because I'm big into all the country stuff and everything. So I watch the bull ride. And it's like, how do these guys do it? It's always like you can't out muscle the bull. So you're not getting some big 250-pound guy on the bull. You just got to ride. So it's usually like a small guy. It's 160 pounds. The worst part is when they fall off and then the bull comes after trying to get them. So, yeah.
Yeah, and that's really an athletic event. I mean, you've got to be in incredible shape to do that and strong. You're trying to hang on. I actually covered one of those when I worked in Arizona, in the late 70s. I went to a rodeo and had to cover the rodeo.
One of my proudest things, Mike Rogers lived out in Calgary, and we played together. And he had me out to Calgary for the Calgary Stampede one time. And we sat around with a bunch of the Cowboys and drank beverages out of my cowboy hat. And they signed it for me. I still have the hat here someplace, too. So that was one of my proudest moments. So
I thought you were going to tell me your proudest moments you rode a bull.
No, I've not ridden. I've rode the electric ones or whatever those mechanical balls. I've ridden one of those, but
did you fall off or did you hang on?
I hung on there pretty good. Yeah, it was good. That was fun. I can't remember where we were. It might have been Calgary. It might have been like when we went out to Colorado. When Colorado first had the Rockies, I think my first year before they moved to the Devils. We'd go. There was a blast. We'd go to places and you sit on the saddles at the bar. They'd have saddled seats and all this kind of stuff. So I was in my heyday. I loved it.
Well, my first job out in after college was at a newspaper in Casa Grande, Arizona, and it was about the time that the movie Urban Cowboy came out, and the mechanical bulls and the Western bars, and that's what life was like. Like after the paper would be out, we'd go to the bar and you'd be out there, and it was like the movies too. Like one time I was at a bar in Stanfield, and a bar fight broke out, and people were swinging pool sticks at each other, just like you're watching a movie, and it just seemed almost surreal, because it was there's guys in cowboy hats. And
well, my first year in the NHL, I was still wearing I was in Manhattan playing for the Rangers, wearing a cowboy hat and cowboy boots, and I was thinking I was the coolest dude on the planet too. But I look back at that, it's like, oh God.
Well, that's Ontario is not exactly out west.
No,
I mean, and if you're a farm boy, you should have been in overalls.
Yeah. Even like when I got in the agent business, I was still wearing the cowboy boots with the suits and everything too. People are like, I'd go to weddings and people say, "You're not going to wear your cowboy boots." So yeah. And I had some really nice boots too. I stopped wearing them, so I haven't got them anymore. But
wow, well, that's interesting. Anyway. We've gone overtime, which is not shocking for the Layla and Allen report. Now, can I say we'll see him next week, Tom? Because
Kevin, you're allowed to. Yes.
Yeah. Good job. All right. So I will see everybody next week. Thanks for joining us.
All right, guys.